Hello and welcome to My Dietitian Journey. I'm Felicia, owner and registered dietitian at Paraz Nutrition and My Dietitian Journey. Today, I want to talk about helping your patients through the change process with a tool called Decisional Balance. If you've been working with patients, you've likely encountered at least one patient who is wanting to make a change, like incorporating exercise, but they're having a hard time getting started. They might see things like, I know I need to exercise, but I don't have the time. Or they might say, I like to walk, but it's too cold outside. You may also hear things like, I want to be more active, but I don't even know where to start. I don't know why this is so hard. This ambivalence is very normal when a patient is considering a change and prominent in the contemplation stage of the trans-theoretical model. This ambivalence is when an individual is expressing a reason for change, often referred to as change talk, and against change, also referred to as sustained talk. Once an individual is able to work through ambivalence, they can move forward to what is called the preparation stage, where the individual is likely to take a small action step and incorporate a new behavior within 30 days. Resolving this ambivalence and developing discrepancy is one of the core principles of motivational interviewing, which is defined as a client-centered directive method for enhancing intrinsic motivation to change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. This leads us to where an activity like decisional balance can be useful. The decisional balance procedure examines the pros and cons of behavior change. With this procedure, you are providing space for your patients to express a reason for and against change, and also highlight the discrepancy that exists between their current behaviors and desired ones. Through this process, your patient would be exploring the advantages and disadvantages of making a change and also not making a behavior change. This is much different than the more traditional approach of just telling patients why they should change and it coming from you as the clinician. Being able to elicit motivation against and for change is a way to bring to light this ambivalence and work with your patients through it. Let's review what the process looks like for decisional balance. Now, there are a lot of ways you can go about this in a session. You can just use open-ended questions and reflections to explore pros and cons of changing and not changing. You can also use open-ended questions and reflections along with a worksheet to explore with the patient. Personally, I like to use an activity sheet like this one because it provides a patient with a takeaway, and we can also refer back to the sheet together when the patient is working through change in future sessions. So the first step in this process is to have the patient determine the behavior they are considering changing. This can be broad, like eating healthier, or incorporating exercise, or getting more sleep. It doesn't have to be a specific SMART goal at this point. I like to also preface the conversation with the fact that working through this activity does not mean we are looking to make any changes. The point is really to explore both sides of the change and perhaps brainstorm and look to next steps, which may or may not mean setting goals. Ultimately, it's the patient's decision to make a change, and one activity usually isn't the sole factor in leading them into the next stage of change. Once your patient has identified a behavior they are considering changing, the next step is to have them list the benefits of not changing their behavior or benefits of staying the same. It is important to start here because this can help reduce resistance to change. Next would be to explore the cons or negatives of the current behavior. With this section, you will be likely starting to hear the patient voice change talk. Next is to look at the cons or negatives of making the change. This will help you and the patient be able to explore barriers, fears, or concerns they have about change. Lastly, we end with the pros or benefits of making the change. At this point, the patient is really arguing for change. You might be wondering how to integrate this into a session and when to do it. When I start to hear a patient really voicing ambivalence regarding change, and it's clear they are in this stage of contemplation, I would explore a bit with some open-ended questions and then move into introducing the activity as an option if it seems like a good fit. I might say something like, based on what you shared so far, there's a worksheet I think might be helpful for us to work through together. Have you ever heard of the concept of decisional balance? Usually the answer is no, but if they had, I elicit from them what they heard about it. If they have not heard about decisional balance, I share some information about the worksheet. I might say something like, the decisional balance activity is a way to evaluate the pros and cons of making a change. We would first talk about a wellness change you are thinking about making. Then we will explore the pros and cons for that change. I then move into eliciting permission or the patient's okay to move forward. So I would say, would you be open to giving this a try? Do you have any questions before we get started? While going through the activity, I really emphasize the patient filling in the worksheet themselves or writing down responses or using screen sharing to be able to work together with the patient. I also let the patient know we will be starting at the top right of the worksheet and moving in a clockwise motion. I then get into the process like I mentioned before, exploring first the behavior they are considering changing, and then moving into the positives of not making this change or staying the same, negatives of not making this change or staying the same, negatives of making the behavior change, and then ending with the positives or reasons for making the change. Once you work through the decisional balance activity with someone, you would want to follow that with some open-ended questions to continue the conversation. One of my go-to questions is, what stands out to you when looking at the chart we just filled in? Another question I might ask is, if you were to consider making this change, what steps would you need to take? I have also asked about the importance of making the change. An example could be, thinking about the behavior you would like to change, what stands out to you as your most important reason for wanting to make this change? Depending on the conversation, I might say, I'm curious, if you were to consider making a change, what steps would you need to take? If it seems like an individual might be open to or ready for a small step, I might also pose a question like, based on what you shared, is there a particular step or area you can experiment with this week? I really lean on my motivational interviewing skills, specifically the open-ended questions and reflections, to dive deeper with the patient, all while still emphasizing their autonomy in taking any steps. It's really important to not force the goal-setting process with a patient who is not yet ready for implementation of a particular behavior change. Active listening is crucial to make sure the strategies and way you move through the session are matched to what the patient needs. Here is an example decisional balance matrix. This example patient has identified the behavior they want to change as eating healthier. Starting at the top right corner, their positives of staying the same include no effort needed, not having to think about what they need when eating out, and being able to continue to enjoy their favorite foods. At the bottom right corner, their negatives of not making the change or staying the same include not improving their health, not losing weight, potentially gaining more weight, not having a lot of energy, and not being able to control their cholesterol levels. At the bottom left corner, their negatives of making the change include potentially spending more money on healthy foods, not liking the healthy food options, and spending more time cooking. Lastly, we end at the top left corner with the positives or benefits of making the change, which include having more energy to do things they enjoy, weight loss, controlling cholesterol levels, and feeling better overall. In summary, the decisional balance activity is a way to examine the pros and cons of a behavior change with your patient. This activity can be a way to start a conversation around the ambivalence of change, which is very normal, and a way to develop discrepancy, which is a core principle of motivational interviewing. Thanks for listening, and be sure to leave a comment if you have any questions and subscribe for more content.